Hey guys, welcome to another episode of OFA Shop. This week, I'll get the service tray back together, get the fuel tanks mounted, and get it out of the shed. New day, a new job, a new problem. So I've got about 6.5 hours today. Try and smash into this. I'm not going to bother with lunch. That can wait for tomorrow. So I've got some angle line here. I was talking to my mate Richo last night, and we were talking about trying to get these things on the correct pitch and try and get them nice and level with each other and even. So we need to get the pitch perfect, and then we can put some angle line across the top, screw them down. Same on the back, and that way we can set the width and the pitch. And then hopefully, I've got 4 pieces of angle line, one on top, on front and back, and then probably right at the back, and then maybe at the front on the bottom. Try and get all the widths right and get everything square. So I'll mess with that, and I'll catch you up once I've got something. So that took a fair bit of massaging, but we've got the top bar on. It's very close to flat and level with the top of the containers. And then that's screwed down, and then I've done the same at the bottom. Now the width is absolutely perfect. So it's 2250, bang on, top and bottom and in the middle. And then this middle bar is where I was having problems. So I made them 990, thinking that's how long it would end up. And I've gained 10 mil, so they're actually 1 meter long. So I assume what I've done is cut these just a little bit shorter than I expected. So no issues there. I can still get a weld on it. Probably better, to be honest, now, because I can get a better weld on it. Because you've got a little bit of extra RHS down the bottom here. So I could weld that front one in. And I'm super confident with it, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to square the back up first and make sure it's right. So I'm going to do this again at that end. Well, I don't believe it, so I don't expect you guys to, but this is within 1 millimeter. Front to back, top to bottom, everything I can think of possibly measuring is within 1 millimeter. And I'm pretty stoked. So we've got the angle line up the top there, down the bottom, one on the back of the toolboxes, and then one down the middle at the back. So this whole back section is going to get cut off. So it's mainly that section, but now it's all dead square. These toolboxes are straight. Everything is actually measuring up perfectly. So now I can actually weld in that front bar, probably this one as well, I guess. And I also know roughly where I want to put some of the middle ones. So I might put some of those in as well. And then this thing will be locked in place. I'll leave these front 3 as long as I can, because they can stay there and they can come off at the last minute. And then the back one will get fixed when I do the tailgate. So that'll be easy enough. Speaking of those cross braces, now I need to work out where the engine's going to go. So the Isuzu is right here, which is convenient. Got the tape measure hard up against the tray, which is conveniently right about where I can put something flat on the chassis rails. I may need a little bit more than that for that top gearbox bolt, but I think everything else is underneath the chassis rails, which is what we're after. And if you come to the front of the engine, it's right at about 850. So if I leave 900, we should have plenty of room to get this engine in there. Probably going to be really tricky to try and work on, but that's later Jeff's problem. So 900 mil from the front cross member to the second cross member. So I've measured the engine. I've measured this 1,000,000 times. So what I'm going to do is weld this guy in. I'm happy with the placement of that one. And then the second one's going to be 990 mil back. Why 990? Because these pieces are 990 and I've got a spare one I can use to space it all. The engine's 900 long. I figured 950 would be good to have a little bit of a buffer room. And then 990 is only 40 mil more, which more room is not a bad thing in this situation, because you might have to take a gearbox off, or you might have to actually get to the engine and do some stuff, take the belt drive off, or get in, you know, without taking the engine out, you got another 40 mil. So it should be hopefully enough. You'll have about 90 mil roughly to make the engine fit. So it should be okay. So what I'm going to do is grind the paint off this guy where I've marked it, and then I'll weld that one on, and then I'll take this one off, grind the paint off, weld this one on, and then I'm going to go from this one that will be welded on 620 mil back, because that's how big the fuel tanks are, and then weld the next bar in 620 mil, weld the next bar in. So I'm actually 1 bar short because I need to keep that one there for as long as I can. So I'm going to order some steel for the back, and then I can replace those and then move that bar forwards. Obviously that's a bit mixed up, but it'll be okay. I know what's going on, and you'll see it come together right now. It's official, I have a gift. Now you might think my gift is with welding, fabrication. It's not. My gift is that I turn the camera off and forget to turn the bloody thing back on. I've welded 4 beams in. So the camera was on for this one, and then I went and got a drink, and then forgot to turn it back on. But those two are welded back in now. I replaced the back one with a piece of angle line, so that'll get replaced again later. But for now, we've got 4 very sturdy RHS crossbars all welded in, so the chassis of the Isuzu will sit underneath those, and it should be nice and solid. So my plan for today was to get this bit done, get it all square, get these guys welded in, and that took me about 3 hours. So it's pretty good, but I have about 3.5 hours left of time. So what am I going to do? I don't really know, but I think it's time to show you guys the fuel tanks. So these are off of a semi. There was a smaller one as well up the front, and then these guys are the auxiliary tank, I guess. They're absolutely massive, and the plan for them is to go one there and one back there. So there is going to be 2 tanks. They are about 200 to 250 litres. So I'll have around 500 litres up top here, and then I'd like to keep the original tank as well for the fuel gauge and just to run around town with, which is about 80 litres. So we're looking at, say, 550 litres to 600, hopefully, judging by the tanks, which will get me about 3,000 Ks whilst towing. So that's ridiculous, but that's what we want. Ridiculous is my middle name. So I've had a bit of a thinking break, and I can get the fuel tank in there like I wanted to. Now I can get the original truck brackets under there, which is even better than I was hoping. I thought I was going to have to make something from scratch, which would probably be better, but it's going to take a lot of time and it's not worth the result. So you can see the fuel tank actually sits up just a little bit. Now that's going to be okay because this thing's going to have a roof rack on it and a rooftop tent. So with the tent, the problem with that is it is 1500 wide, normally run this way, so 2200 by 1500, but I want to run it 2200 by 1500. So with my 450 on the front, that brings us to like right here. So if I roll the tank to the position it would have been when it was mounted to the semi, there's a drain port on the bottom, so I can reference that. I get about 1550 clearance. So I've got about 50 mil to play with, which is just enough. Then I've got the original truck brackets here, and there'll be a second tank here, probably facing that way, so you can reach over and do the filling. So now what I need to do is make some brackets to hold all this together in place, and then the straps from the original tanks can go back on. They will be a little wider than they were, but that's a very small price to pay. But I think it fits pretty well, really. So that'll be the 2 fuel tanks in there, and we'll have plenty of room for the engine as well, because this has actually moved back just a tiny bit more. So that crossmember actually could have been back even further. So there'll be plenty of room here in case I do have to do engine stuff. I don't want to have to, obviously, but I don't want to have to take the tray off to work on the engine, especially in the middle of nowhere or a caravan park somewhere. That'd be miserable. So that'll be okay. Just rather leave a little bit of room now than hate it later. So I'll go get a bunch of steel. I need to get some rubber for the straps, and I got a few other errands to run. So I'll go do all that, and I might catch you guys in the morning. So it's a new morning. Got all the steel yesterday, so this should be enough to finish off the back half of the tray. got some supports for the bits I cut out right at the back, and just some more bits. I also mocked up the fuel tank. So my mate Ronnie came over last night and gave me a hand to just mock this up. It was just more of a two-person holding everything kind of job. So I've just spaced those with the parts that I actually want to use to hold the centers together, but they're in a little bit. So now we'll be able to put the fuel tank on there and run the straps over the top. So they should be good. So what I need to do now is just make those attached, which is not as easy as it sounds, but I'll work something out. So I was gonna cut an angle down here, so I may still do that. I'm not 100% sure. So the only issue with how this is sitting right now is that the bottom of this here is actually just a little bit lower than the rail, which means that it will actually be at the same height as the chassis. So I need to lift it up just a tiny little bit or trim the bottom of that off. So I'm not 100% sure which way I'll go with that just yet, but I'll work it out. Then the next thing is these are a little too long. So what I want to do is cut this through here and then put a L bracket on the bottom to actually bolt it to this guy, or weld it to this guy and bolt it here. I'm not 100% sure. So that's a problem. Same at that end. And then the middle are a little bit tall, so I might cut those down at some point, but the fuel tanks are also pretty tall, so it doesn't really matter. It's just one of those things. So then I want to put these angle iron, which is a bit annoying, off of here, and they'll come up through here, and I'll run the bolts through the angle iron, and that'll hold them in the right orientation. So I may start there, and then everything else will sort of fall into place. So it's a little tricky, but I'll just chuck you on time lapse and we'll get going. Alright, the fuel tanks are in place, so I've got the straps just thrown over quickly. Now you can see this one is about 2 inches off this side and 5 mil off that side. And then that one is the opposite. So these have a drain on the bottom of them, which lines up exactly where I've put the brackets. And I can't move the brackets evenly, so I either have to have the brackets offset or the tanks offset. But because I've got 2 tanks and they're facing the opposite directions, I can't move the brackets. So unfortunately I'm going to have to run with the offset tanks, and I hate it, but I could fix it later by modifying the bracket and putting a pass through for the fitting. But that's it for now. That's pretty good. So that's not tight, but they're on there. So I need to go get some rubber to isolate this thing. Just make the mounts down there, and the middle mounts are just clamped, they're not welded. So still a bit more to go, but that's the plan right there. I'm sick of leaving the house for this project. $100 worth of rubber, $75 worth of brass plugs. Damn. All right, so new rubber for the fuel tanks, new rubber to isolate the bottom, which I probably don't need, but I'd like to do it properly. And then I've got new plugs for the holes and a couple of 90 degrees to run fuel line. Just need to organize some breathers, so that's a later problem. And I've also decided I'm going to cut the hole in and move these tanks to the center, because if I don't, it'll drive me nuts forever. So I just busted through that really quickly. The fuel tanks are now even, or very, very close to. So I just had to move the bracket a little bit and then drill a like 50 mil hole for one of the fittings to fit through the bracket. So that all fits really well now. So now I want to move on to straps, get these nubs ground off. So there was a bracket there for the steps, so I cut those off, but now I want to get rid of the rest of the welds on all 4 straps, and then I can put the foam on and the rubber and bolt these things down properly. But I don't need to do that right now, so I'll just get these bolts back in loosely, and then other than that we need to mount the fuel tanks and then we're good to go. So I need to move on to these front mounts, and then I'll do the back ones, and then I can weld it all together, and they're pretty much in their finished position. So I skipped filming most of that process. So what I've come up with is a piece of RHS. It is a 5 or 6 mil wall, crush tube in the middle, welded on, and then that's a 14 mil hole. So the idea is these will slip into your fuel tank brackets like that, and then I will put the bolt through this guy and through the bracket. And then to hold it on, I've got these bits of 5 mil plate. They will weld onto the box like this and then get welded to the RHS like that. So there is absolutely no way they're coming off. Not in a hurry, there'll be welds everywhere. Then this will be fully captive and it should look pretty nice. Then if I want to get the tanks out, I can unbolt them and lift both tanks out at the same time. Obviously that middle bracket I need to make bolt on as well, but that's a slightly in the future problem. So I'm in between the tray here. These are the uprights that are going to hold the middle of the fuel tanks. So I've cut them to length, got them to the right height, got them all squared up and everything. So I'm ready to weld those on. So I'll weld these two guys on here, go over to the other side, weld down on both sides. I can bolt these brackets back on, put the tanks back in for the 675th time. Alright, they're all welded in. Done the tops and the sides. Again, I left the bottom. I'll do all of the bottom welds at once, which is going to be a miserable day, but I'll do that all at once. So now I can bolt these guys back on, make sure everything fits. Then I can finish off the front and rear fuel tank mounts, which is going to be pretty easy, I hope. I've already made most of them, so they should go together pretty quick. Okay, there we have the middle mounts welded to the chassis or the frame or whatever you want to call it. And the fuel tanks can get centered, which is nice because that was going to annoy me a lot. And then this tank here is also rolled over a little bit to get that 1100 from the front that we need to fit the rooftop tent later. And I may have to spin the breather around, but for now it's pointing this way because the hose clip is just there. So that's pretty good. Now I need to do the front and the rear mounts, which I've got tacked up, ready to go. But I have to get some bolts first, so they'll have to wait for tomorrow, and it's also almost dark and I can't use the welder and the lights at the same time. My shed's not wide and I'm a goose. So I'll come back out in the morning and we'll get into those brackets. So it's another new morning, and what I'm going to do today is get these fuel tanks finally mounted up. So yesterday I made these guys, and then I mounted the straps with the center bar, and then that made these too short. So what I'm going to have to do is actually space these up, which I don't want to do, but I don't want to make these again, and you're never going to see it. What I'm going to do is drill out a hole that way, through that thing there. Then this will slide up, you got to put a bolt through it, and then I'm going to have to space this up probably 25 mil. So I'll just jump into it, we'll get it done. So I didn't bother filming because I think this episode's gone on long enough. But there's the mount all welded on. So it's a piece of 5mm flat bar on either side. And this is the 5mm 50 by 75 with the crush tube in it. And then this piece down the bottom is a piece of 50 by 25 just to get the height right. So everything's welded together. They're not my best welds, but they're pretty substantial and there's more than enough there. So now I can put this tank bracket back in, bolt it to there, bolt it to here, and that thing's not going anywhere. And then I need to do this one and the back two. So I'll catch you up once all of this is back together. There we have one side bolted in at the front, bolted in the middle, and ready to go. So the only thing left to do is paint this and put the rubber strip on, and then I can get the straps cleaned up and put those on. Okay, there we have two bolts in, two mounts welded on. Those bolts are all in. I've left the outside ones out because I have to take that side apart. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this really quickly and chuck the foam on, and then I'll chuck the fuel tank in, put the straps on, clean the straps up, all that stuff. Get this side completely finished, and then I'll move over to the other side. So I've had a bit of a clean up and I moved the tray forwards. So this front tank is all finished off. The front mounts are super sturdy. Got new straps on there with the new rubber, the new foam, new bolts. So that's all good and happy. Then if we move to the back, I've spent about 3 hours staring at this. So with the front one, this bar is actually a lot further forwards in comparison to the brackets. So the attachment was a lot easier, but this one is proving quite difficult. So I think I'm going to call it an early night. It's like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and come back to this in the morning and try and work out what we're doing. One large redacted scene later, mounted. So now I just need to grind the little nubs off of the straps, clean those up, paint them, cut the rubber, and then bolt it all together. So there's still a little bit of cleaning up that needs to be done on the ends here, but that will do for now. So the last thing to do before I need to move this thing is to put on the big RHS that goes from side to side. So I'll cut that to length and I'll weld that on, and then this thing can get out of the shed. And there we have the start of the tray. So there'll be another one up here and another one back here, and then the cross beams on the ends, but that will have to come later. That'll do for now. So after all that work, it's back together, it's out of the shed. Now I just need to get it on the truck. So next week I'll pull the tray off the truck and we'll start trying to get this thing mounted back on there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.